Welcome to Talk Ottumwa, a production of Greater Ottumwa Partners in Progress. On this podcast, we'll talk about the local businesses in Ottumwa to give you the backstory to their success. We'll also talk about the economic initiatives that are driving the progress of the community. And we'll talk about the issues that the community faces and much more. So stick around and let's talk Ottumwa. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the final episode in our series about youth mental health in Ottumwa and Wapello County. And to this point, we have had a very healthy conversation revolving around some of the mental health issues that we have in Ottumwa and Wapello County, specifically in the school district. We have talked about some of the precursors to the mental health situation that we have. We've talked about mental health from the perspective of the youth in the community. We have talked about mental health from the perspective of the counselors. We've talked about youth activism, and we have talked about some of the available resources that we have in the community to help with the mental health situation. Today, in wrapping up our conversation, we have with us Christina Schark. Christina is arguably one of the leading experts in mental health in Ottumwa and Wapello County, and in fact, the state of Iowa. She is Executive Director of Southern Iowa Mental Health. She has sat on the board of the Iowa Association of Community Providers. And as luck would have it, she is also a member of the Ottumwa School Board. So welcome to the program, Christina.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Can you start off just telling a little bit about yourself and since you are in a mental health field, what brought you to that?
That's actually kind of a funny story because I was born and raised in Ottumwa, graduated from Ottumwa High School a number of years ago. Moved away for college, came back to Ottumwa to get married. So my husband, Chris, and I have 3 boys. We've raised here in Ottumwa. 2 have graduated so far, and we have 1 more up at the high school. So we're kind of lifelong Ottumwa people, and we plan to stay here even after our kids have moved away. So when I moved back to Ottumwa, I needed to get a job, of course. I just graduated from high school or from college, and I knew that I wanted to. My bachelor's degree is actually in public health, and so at the time, if you wanted to work in healthcare, Ottumwa Regional was really where it was at. So I went there first, and one of the first job positions that I got at Ottumwa Regional was working as a business coordinator at Family Recovery, which at that time it was a residential substance abuse treatment facility. And I really didn't know anything about substance abuse or mental health. I got a job there working with the patients there and working on their insurance side of things and just really fell in love with the field. I completely fell in love with the patients, the idea of recovery, the idea that treatment works. I had a chance to see patients come in and out of our facility and do really well and find recovery, and I had a chance to see their families heal. I had a chance to see people just really get their footing and just completely fell in love with substance abuse and mental health. So that was in the year 2001. So fast forward to 2023, I've just done different positions throughout the community, but I really found my footing and found my passion in substance abuse and mental health really kind of by accident, to be completely honest. I went to this job interview at Ottumwa Regional because I knew I was getting married. I knew we were starting a family. I knew we were setting up, roots in Ottumwa, and I wanted to be in healthcare, and I wanted to work at Ottumwa Regional, and I thought, well, here's a job opening. We'll give this a try. Honestly, my plan was to work there for a couple of months and then kind of watch for an internal transfer. I don't really know what else I was looking for, but I didn't think at the time that substance abuse was going to be my thing because it was new to me. But like I said, it didn't take long before I really became very passionate about this idea of treatment. Unfortunately, we also had a chance to see cases where treatment didn't work, where people had a relapse and they came back to our facility. And I remember just really having that aha moment of what would these people do if we weren't here? What would their families do? What would their jobs look like? What would their lives look like if they didn't have substance abuse treatment as an option? And so that's really kind of what got me thinking about just the whole public policy side of things, about how, there's a responsibility that our society has to provide these kinds of treatments and provide these kinds of options for people. Just really getting a chance to see kind of the full spectrum, the good and the bad of substance abuse work. So a few years after starting that job, I went back to school and got my master's degree in healthcare administration. And that was really where I got kind of the passion for the finance side of healthcare and really looking at how do we continue to make substance abuse and mental health treatment options available.
So from your perspective, what do you see as the prevailing issue revolving around mental health in our area, or maybe even nationally? I don't know.
Well, I have always believed that probably one of our biggest barriers is stigma. I think we've done a really good job with that. And actually, that's probably the only good thing I can think that came out of COVID was we all got a little bit more comfortable talking about depression and anxiety, because for the first time in my lifetime, pretty much everybody was depressed and anxious during COVID. So I feel like we've come a long ways with stigma really quickly in the last couple of years, but I still feel like that's a big issue. Even when I talk to people about substance abuse treatment, that's just one of those things that people don't want to talk about if they think it's them. Especially kind of older people, there's still kind of that stigma. It's a generational thing, and I think our young people have done a really good job of combating that stigma, but I still think it exists.
It's weird that you use the word stigma, because every single person that has come in this series has mentioned the stigma and people not wanting to talk about it, especially the teens that have been in and talked about this. The biggest thing that they have talked about is almost an embarrassment when they talk to not only their friends, but their family, other community members, that mental health doesn't exist in the eyes of those people that they're talking to. So that's really interesting that's been a universal truth throughout this entire series. Looking at everything that you have just said, where does Southern Iowa mental health fit into this conversation?
Yeah, so Southern Iowa is a treatment facility. So if a person has gotten to the point where they feel like they need some type of mental health or substance abuse treatment, that's where we can help. So we don't necessarily work on the prevention end of things. We're more the treatment facility part. So if a person decides, I'll use a physical health example because we're more comfortable with that usually. But if somebody has like chronic headaches and they get to the point where they feel like their headaches are really impacting their daily lives, they'll go to the doctor, they'll ask for some tests, they'll ask for an exam, and they'll maybe get some medication to help with their headaches. So that same thing happens at Southern Iowa. So if a person has a symptom of some type of emotional distress that begins to impact their daily activities, then they might go out and seek a physician to do an exam, run some tests, those kinds of things, and get some treatment that helps. So that's where we come into play when people have decided they need to seek professional help. Not all mental illnesses need professional help. There's a lot of self-help things that people can do for themselves. But when they have reached that point where they need a professional to get involved and offer some treatment, then that's when we come in.
Let's talk about it from the school side of things. I know that the Ottumwa Community School District, Cardinal Community School District, EBF, they have all really grabbed onto the idea of positive mental health and helping students through the situations that they might have arise. And the Ottumwa Community School District is actually getting ready to unveil a room specific for children that are really just needing to get away for a few minutes. Has mental health been something that Ottumwa School District has taken seriously over the last few years, and what actions do you see the school district taking moving forward to promote positive mental health with our students?
I think there again, that's really a place where our young generation has really stepped up to the plate to combat this, not just in Ottumwa schools, but I feel like statewide, school districts and high school students have really taken this issue very seriously lately. So Ottumwa started a therapeutic classroom, and I believe Eddyville-Blakesburg has that as well, a couple years ago, and that's for elementary age students who need just a different learning environment to work through some of their emotional or their behavioral issues. The room at the high school is a little bit different. It's more of like a kind of a de-stress room, and that I believe is open for staff and students, not just students to go to, but staff as well. Just kind of a place to go in and take a breather, relax, maybe talk with someone if they want to, but just those kind of self-help strategies that are really helpful. You know, we all remember like in preschool and even younger where we would do timeouts, and a kid that was really upset or disgruntled about something, the teacher would say, you need to take a timeout. Well, adults need a timeout too.
That's
and
no
that,
lie.
Yeah. And that room is kind of, I'm oversimplifying it, but really it's just a place to just kind of take a few minutes and just decompress and pull yourself together and get back out into the day.
Looking at some of the precursors to mental health crises that people in general have, I remember looking back at, I think it was a 2018 Iowa Youth Survey, and I think it's probably filtered through to the 2020 or 22, whichever the most recent one is. A lot of the triggers to mental health that we have seen in students, one of which is substance abuse, when people traditionally thought that they were getting introduced to these sorts of things, which would have been really the high school level, they're seeing it at the 8th grade and sometimes the 6th grade levels. Is there an appropriate time that we really need to be reaching out to the students to ensure that their well-being is being taken care of?
Well, I think when you think about well-being, that's kind of a spectrum, you know, like a scale of 1 to 10. And I don't think it's ever really too early. I mean, I think even in kindergarten, we can talk about things that make us happy. We can talk about things that make us sad. We can talk about, even in preschool, I know at Pickwick, they work with kids on self-regulation, on coping skills. You know, we're past that age of crying and throwing things when we don't get our way. So what are better ways to communicate our frustrations? What are better ways to use our words and talk about the things that are making us upset? So really, in some very simple terms and in some simple ideas, I think that kind of work can start pretty early. Now, I do think, and this leads me off onto a different rabbit trail a little bit, but I do think one negative part of just kind of being more aware of all of our emotions is it feels like to me, and I don't know if this is because I don't put myself in the young generation category, so maybe this is just the way an older person looks at this, but I feel like a lot of young people today, we are working really hard to avoid everything bad. So if I ever feel bad about anything, then oh my gosh, you know, that's a mental health thing. I need some medicine, or I need a timeout, or I need to, you know, we have to take all these things in balance, because I do believe that humans were created on purpose with lots of different emotions. We were given, you know, hundreds really of different kinds of emotions, and every emotion plays a purpose in a different part of our lives. There's a time to be sad, there's a time to be happy, there's a time to be anxious. And in some examples and in some ways, anxiety or nervousness is good for us. Anxiety or nervousness is the thing that keeps our bodies safe. It's the thing that's kind of our warning flag inside our head to say, like, don't do that, slow down. Being nervous sometimes can help us study for a test, get ready for a podcast that you're super worried about, do any of these kinds of things that, you know, that's the normal growth and development. And so I do think we have to be careful with the messaging to young people of, yes, we want them to take care of themselves. Yes, we want them to regulate their emotions, but it's unrealistic if our message to young people is you should feel good 100% of the time. You should feel happy all the time. And how do we take every emotion, analyze it, look at it? Why am I feeling this way? Does this make sense for the situation that I'm in? And if it's an emotion I don't like, how do I toss it and go on to the next one? But I do think it's possible to overcorrect in the way we're looking at depression and anxiety, sadness, fear, nervousness, any of those things that usually get categorized as negative emotions. There is a time and a place where our young people need a chance to practice those skills. They need a chance to, you know, sometimes I tell my kids, it's okay to be bored for a minute. Think about, you know, what you want to do differently. It's okay to feel nervous before a big test. That's the thing that propels you to study. It's okay to feel nervous on your first day of school. That's our life keeping us safe. It's okay to feel scared when you have to drive. It's what keeps us driving under the speed limit, paying attention. That little part of your brain that says, no, maybe don't go with those friends. That little part of your brain that says, no, don't drink that drink. Don't take that drug. Those are all things that are inside of us by design to keep us safe. So if our message to kids is, you should feel good all the time, I don't think that's fair. I think that's setting them up to fail too.
Well, I'm not a professional, but I tell you, I can't agree more with that statement. I do think that we have went a little bit too far on that particular piece of it. But that being said, and maybe this is more of a philosophical question than anything, where is that balance when you've passed the safe level of emotion into that unsafe level of emotion?
Yeah, that is a perfect question. That's actually a question that we get all the time. Because I think one of the things we see, unfortunately, is people will wait too long to seek treatment. I use the example sometimes of like a mole on your arm. So if you had a mole on your arm, and we're all trained in the ABCD of how to spot like weird skin cancer spots, but if we had one and we knew it was not looking good, we knew it was abnormal, and we go to our dermatologist and we say, hey, can you look at this? And the dermatologist says, oh my gosh, that mole looks terrible. I'm so glad you came in. How long has it been like this? And we said to her, well, it's looked this bad for about 10 years. She would say, oh my gosh, why did you wait 10 years to get here? But we know research tells us that people with a mental health issue wait on average 10 years before they seek a professional. So on one hand, I say, we have to be realistic about the range of emotions, but on the other hand, don't wait 10 years to come talk to a professional. That doesn't make sense either. So that I would say, it's an extremely common question that we get. How do we know when? And what I tell people on that issue is think about the question, what's the function? Always be asking yourself, what is this person's ability to function? And what I mean by that is when we think about function means your ability to work, carry out daily activities, and engage in satisfying relationships. So when you feel like your mental health symptoms are engaging or are deviating you from being able to do one of those three things, then that's the time to probably seek a professional. So let me use a couple of examples. I kind of jokingly said, it's normal to be nervous on the morning that you have to do a podcast because I've never done a podcast before. So driving in, I'm thinking to myself, what if Mark asks something really hard? What if I fumble all over my words? And of course, none of those things are true. But even though I had, maybe the fumble over my words is true, but so far your questions have been fine. But even though I had symptoms, so as I'm driving downtown, I've got kind of a pit in my stomach, my hands are kind of sweaty, my heart is pounding a little bit, I'm a little nervous when I first walk in the door. So you could describe all of those things as signs or symptoms of just kind of an anxious moment. But I'm here, I showed up, I got dressed, I came to work, I did what was expected of me today. So my symptoms or my moment of feeling anxious and nervous did not impact my function. So that's the difference. So let's use a different example. I'm one of those people, I hate winter. I absolutely hate it. I don't think there's just no purpose in winter. And so when I wake up in the morning, and this time of year really starts to get to me, I notice that it's still dark. I usually get up around 6. It's still dark at 6. The sun hasn't come up. And I've noticed the sun is going down before 8. And so I'm one of those people that I start to get kind of anxious or depressed, especially come like January or February. So let's say I'm a person on January 5th. It's dark and it's cold, and I wake up in the morning, I open up my curtain, and it's just snowed. And I'm just completely depressed and annoyed, and I shut my curtain, and I go back to bed, and I pull the covers over my head, and I don't show up for work. Let's say the next day, I pull open my curtains, and the sun is shining, and it's still a little chilly, but the snow is melting, and things are better. And again, I lay down, I pull over my pillows and I pull over my blankets over my head and I go back to sleep. Let's say a couple months later, it's raining, I do the same thing. So I've let my depressive feelings, my sad feelings, my anxious feelings now start interfering with my function. I'm letting these things dictate whether or not I'm going to work or not. So anytime you get to the point, so those are two examples. In the first example, I felt anxious, but I still did what I needed to do. So that wouldn't classify itself as an anxiety concern or disorder that needs a professional. But in the second example, I've let my feelings impact my function. I've let my feelings dictate whether or not I'm getting up and going to work today. Do we have bad days? Yes. On the first snow, I don't want to go to work. That's a bad day for me. But if it happens routinely, if over and over and over, despite all these other things changing, you find yourself letting your symptoms interfere with function. Is your feelings of anxiety or depression interfering with your ability to work, your ability to carry out daily activities, and your ability to engage in satisfying relationships? If you're having your symptoms interfere with those three things, it could be time to talk to a professional.
And a good place to do that would be Southern Iowa Mental Health.
We have a lot of good places in Ottumwa to do that. But yeah, you're certainly welcome to come to Southern Iowa.
So with the spectrum of services that Southern Iowa Mental Health has, can you go into a little bit of detail about what some of those different service offerings are?
Yeah, for sure. So one thing I want people to know about Southern Iowa Mental Health, and this would be true for all of our service providers in the area, is think about mental health issues on a scale of 1 to 10. So we have those people who are on the lower end of the category, have some kind of minor, so a clinician will measure a mental health disorder in terms of frequency, duration, and intensity. And we do have those people who have what we would consider fairly mild symptoms. They might have seasonal affective disorder. I kind of hit on that a little bit. We have people who maybe have like some postpartum stuff going on. It's fairly normal for people to want to talk to a therapist when there's a life stressor that's happened. Either they've lost a job, lost a parent, started a new job, had a new child, any of those kinds of major life events. For the most part, they are able to function pretty well, but they need just a little bit of help just kind of pushing through a bad moment or pushing through mild symptoms. So I think I'm going to answer your question here in a minute, but I've got a little bit of rambling to say first. I think part of our stigma problem with mental health is when we think of that term mental health, we automatically jump to that level 10 person. So I just want to remind the listeners that mental health is there's a range there. There's a level 1 person who just needs to, talk to a therapist for a brief period of time, or just needs some medication and can do good in between visits. They can come every 6 months and just check in, and that's okay. And then there's that level 10 person who needs 24-hour supervision. They have to have someone with them all the time. They really can't navigate any piece of their lives without a professional helping. So we automatically think of that level 10 person with those level 10 disorders. Sometimes when we think of mental health, we automatically think of like a severe schizophrenic who is not able to work, or a person with severe bipolar who isn't able to live in her own home. That is not the majority of our patients. So to all the level 1 people out there, Southern Iowa is a place for you, but it's also a place for the level 10. So I say all that to say we offer treatment for that full spectrum of person. So we offer outpatient medication management, which is you come in, you talk with a psychiatrist. Sometimes you get a prescription for medicine, sometimes you don't. And then you follow up with them, maybe every 2 or 3 months, or in some cases, maybe just once or twice a year. We offer outpatient therapy, and that can be individual therapy, couples, group therapy. And then we offer outpatient substance abuse treatment for somebody who's maybe had an OWI recently, or had something happen with their work, and their work has asked them for an evaluation, or they've had to have an evaluation for court for some reason. So think of those as like the level 1 through 5 types of services. Those are for people who just need a little bit of assistance. And then on the other end of that spectrum, we do offer some pretty intense case management services. We have what's called an assertive community treatment team, an ACT team, which will follow around a schizophrenic and just really kind of help them navigate all the pieces of their life. We have what's called the Integrated Health Home Program, or IHH, and those are case managers, again, for that more severe and chronic mentally ill population that can help them set up home supports. We offer long-acting injectable antipsychotic medications, again, for those more chronic and severe cases. And then we also have the crisis unit. So recently in Iowa, back in 2018, we saw a really strong push statewide towards crisis services. So we have a 24-hour crisis unit where people can walk in and get some assistance on the spot with a mental health professional, and they're able to stay on that crisis unit for a couple of hours or a couple of days, or in some kind of extreme cases, a couple of months.
Okay. Well, switching gears just a little bit, because with the services that are being offered at Southern Iowa Mental Health, and this kind of goes back with some of the other episodes as well, talking about the activism and the advocacy piece of mental health. One of the things that your organization has been really at the forefront of, at least in this area, has been the legislative advocacy piece. I've made the joke with several people based on several of these legislative forums that I've went to. You are the one person that I would absolutely hate to sit and be against on a legislative forum, because you know everything, at least from that particular standpoint, to argue many of the points that legislators have.
I don't know if that's a compliment or what I should say
okay. I would say that's a high compliment. From a legislative advocacy piece, and I guess I'm asking this from a point of duality, from the community perspective and from the professional perspective in your role now, how important is advocacy in advancing the conversation of mental health?
Yeah, I think it's hugely important. I think healthcare is a very tangled web of lots of different kinds of government oversight. I think in some cases it's been very good. It's moved a cause forward. And I think in some cases it's gotten in the way of the work that professionals are doing. And so I don't think there's really any piece of healthcare that can be done well without that kind of partnership. It's just the relationship has gotten to be too tight for there not to be a really close relationship with state policymakers.
Do you see at this point the state is listening?
I don't know that I feel like the state is listening right now, but I do feel like this is a good time to be in the mental health space because I feel like our community is pushing it. And so by extension, then the state has had to listen. I do feel like we have really good local representation. I've been able to get a hold of Hans Wiltz pretty easily and, give him my thoughts and opinions on different things. So I feel now more than ever, and maybe that's because of who's in office, I feel like we have a good direct relationship and direct line of communication. There's a lot of movement surrounding mental health right now at the state level, and I think there will be more in the next couple of years. I would pause to say that I think that's a result of listening from providers. I'm not sure that that's true, but I do think it's getting a lot of traction right now.
Good. So looking at involvement, which really leads to my next question here, what is it that parents and the community as a whole specifically can do to advance the conversation? Because, just taking your kids to see the therapist, I don't think is the only answer, because, they can take a kid to a therapist, but can they afford the treatment? Can they see it through to the end? So what can they do to help?
Yeah. So I think one of the things parents and the community can do is most of us are not mental health professionals. In fact, I do not have the right kind of licensure or degree to diagnose anyone. Sometimes I think I do. Sometimes I'll say in my head, oh, I think that is, such and such. But of course, I can't do that. I don't have that kind of license. And I would say that that's true for most people. Most of our community, they don't have that kind of license to diagnose, but they can notice. And so one of the phrases that we use often is notice, not diagnose. All of us can notice. And one of the things you're looking for, again, is just that ability to function. So if your kid is having a bad day, you notice that. You notice he seems sad. He's looking down at the ground. He's not making eye contact. He's not talking to me. Okay, then ask yourself, is it interfering with function? Is he still getting up and going to school? How are his grades? How are his friends? How are his relationships? Is he showering? Is he dressing well? So not all of us can diagnose, but all of us can notice. And what you're looking for is a change in behavior. Are you noticing a change from what they were normally? And every kid's normal, every adult's normal is very, very different. But those closest to us, those in our inner circle, they'll be the first to notice if there's a change. And so that's what we implore to people is look around your inner circle. Look at your spouse, look at your kids, look at your parents, look at your best friends, and tell yourself, okay, I'm only responsible for this group. I can't be responsible for all of Ottumwa, but I can be responsible for the people in my house. I can be responsible for my best friends. I can be responsible for my parents, and I'm going to commit to noticing if I notice any kind of drastic change in their behavior, in their appearance. Sometimes people don't realize, but personal hygiene and appearance is a huge indicator of a mental health concern. So if you have a kid, let's say, I have 3 boys, and so sometimes boys don't always care about their appearance. So for 2 of our boys, I would say if they didn't brush their hair every morning or shower every morning, as a parent, I would say that's their baseline, that's their normal, that's not going to alarm me. I have one boy who did particularly like to shower a lot and do his hair and style it and just look a certain way. So for him, that's his baseline, that's his normal. So I would tell parents, look for something different. Is the fact that your one kid who never likes to shower not showering, is that an emergency? Probably not. That's who he is. That's normal. But is your kid who likes to shower all of a sudden not showering? That's a concern. I'm not saying go out and talk to a therapist right away, but all of us can take on the responsibility of saying, I'm going to actively notice a change in behavior of people in my inner circle because those are the people I know. I know you, Mark. I know who you are, but I don't know your baseline. I don't know your baseline emotions. I don't know anything about your normal. You're not in my circle, but somebody is, and so somebody can take that responsibility. I think sometimes we can take on too much. We see that a lot in teachers. They feel responsible for all the kids in their classrooms. We see that with a lot of leaders. We see that with principals. And that's probably unrealistic and sets ourselves up to fail. But we all have a handful of people in our lives that we can commit to keeping track of and to noticing. Then I would say the second step, so my first step is don't diagnose, notice. My second step is then approach. So if I do have, let's go back to the example of, if I do have one of my boys who normally showers and cares a lot about his personal hygiene, all of a sudden change, and for 3 days in a row, doesn't shower or care about his personal hygiene, I've noticed, that's step number 1. Step number 2 is now I need to approach. I need to ask him, hey, I'm concerned about you. Hey, I've noticed this. Hey, what's going on? Hey, why aren't you, you know what I mean? It's notice, not diagnose, and then approach. Ask that person, what's going on? I'm concerned about you. Hey, can we talk? They might have a really simple explanation and say, no, it's no big deal. This happened. And then you're fine. You're good. But people who are having mental health issues and are kind of trending in a downward direction, there's somebody in their lives that noticed that. And too many times what will happen is people will wait until that person has reached a peak crisis point before they'll call our office and just be, completely panicked because these symptoms have gotten so out of control that now they have to be seen right away and everything else has to stop for this person to be seen. Whereas in reality, we probably could have gotten a handle of this a lot better if we would have gotten involved earlier.
What do you see the future of the mental health conversation looking like?
Well, my hope would be is it becomes every day as talking about every other piece of healthcare. So for example, to be able to go to school, you have to have an immunization card. To be able to play sports, you have to have a physical. I would love someday if we added in a third piece and you have to do a depression screener or an anxiety screener, or talk with a person just real quickly about, there's all kinds of screenings out there that you can circle on a scale of 1 to 10 how you're feeling. Just make that as common as all of our physical health kinds of things. I can say there are people who never talk about their mental health at all until they're adults, or too often than not, we don't talk about our mental health at all until there's a huge problem. So I think in the future we'll get to the point where these things just become more and more routine. This year, this was part of state legislation, is the back of all student ID cards have to have a national suicide hotline number on the back of them. And so now that's becoming just routine with the printing of ID cards. So when I was in school, you would have your school, your grade, your name, and your picture, and those were just routine. I want these things to just become a habit. I want these things to just be what we do without thinking about it.
So, great point, but I want to throw the caveat out there. Most of those things come at a cost, and with the stigma that's attached to mental health, there are a lot of people who refuse to even acknowledge that poor mental health exists. It's the proverbial pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You don't have a problem. You just can't handle the world. So with that mentality that's out there, the fact that there's a cost, how do we pay for that, especially in a time when the legislature has been very good about looking at ways that they can save money in the healthcare system, not spend more money?
So this is kind of an unpopular opinion, but I think there is money available in mental health. I think that most people, even in Wapello County, I don't have a statistic on this, you probably do, but most people that come into our office, they have some kind of health insurance, whether it's a Blue Cross plan through their employer, or they have Medicaid, or they have Medicare. Now, for those people who have copays or a deductible, Southern Iowa Mental Health, and I know River Hills, and I'm not sure about the other providers, but we do offer sliding fee scales to help people pay for those copays and offset those expenses. So I'm one of those people who I do think there is some funding available, and don't let that be your barrier. So at our office, we have financial people that can sit down and work through that with you, and we can set you up on a payment plan or help with those kinds of things. As far as just public education material in general, I do think that there is funding available for that through different kinds of grants and different kinds of promotions. Legacy has been a huge resource for Wapello County in helping get that public education out there. The Glow Walk that they help sponsor is happening again next week, and that's a good conversational piece about suicide prevention. So I do think there's some options out there. Sometimes it takes somebody probably as hard as talking about your mental health is talking about finances. So, we're going to ask you to be vulnerable in a couple of different places, but I think if people are willing to do that, there's enough, there are some resources out there that are available, so don't let that be your barrier.
Okay. Well, we are coming to the end of our time. What else do you think that people should know about?
I think that people in general, don't let your symptoms get to be just that level 10 kind of person that I was talking about earlier. Everything does better if you catch it early. If you catch a flu early, you have better symptoms, or you have better outcomes. If you catch cancer early, you have better outcomes. If you catch any kind of physical health thing we're talking about, doctors will constantly say, you should have gotten in here earlier, you should have talked to me about this earlier. The same is true for mental health. We can get ahead of things a lot faster if people will seek out help before they get to that crisis point. Half of all chronic mental health conditions begin between the ages of 14 and 24. So think about your life in between the ages of 14 and 24. That's a period of life where there's some major, major life events that are happening. Look at that window of time to really think about your mental health and really get ahead of some things before they become a big issue, because that's that period of life where you're really making some major life decisions that can have a negative impact. So get ahead of your symptoms. Don't let them become too intense before you seek out treatment. And you owe it to yourself and you owe it to your inner circle to pay attention to those people too.
Okay. And again, one of the resources here in the community is Southern Iowa Mental Health. What's a number that somebody can call if they need to get assistance?
Yep, 682-8772. And our number is answered 24 hours a day, every single day of the year. So if you're a person that wakes up in the middle of the night and you need to talk to someone, call that number. If you're a person that you don't know what to do, you don't know what to do next, call that number. We have crisis response staff that answer that number 24 hours a day, and we can work through a scenario with you. We can troubleshoot with you. We can put together a crisis plan with you over the phone. We can bridge that gap until maybe you call and say, I've got an appointment coming up in a couple weeks, but I'm struggling right now. We can help you bridge that gap until your next appointment. We can offer crisis services right there in the moment, but you're going to get an actual human, a warm voice that answers that phone 24 hours a day, every single day of the year. 682-8772.
Awesome. Well, Christina, thank you for coming in. This has been a great conversation, and I think probably a perfect wrap-up for this series. So, again, if you are struggling, make sure to reach out to Southern Iowa Mental Health or any of the other providers that are here in Ottumwa. So, with that, we will put a wrap on this series on mental health in Ottumwa and Wapello County, and please make sure this is a very important topic. So as you are listening to this episode or any other episode, please make sure to share this among your friends, your family, coworkers, employers, anybody who will listen. Make sure that you get this message out to them. That way we can help to start to steer the conversation in a positive light towards mental health. Thank you.
Thank you.